For the 8th time that year, my sister leaned into my fiancé in front of 32 relatives. She put her hand flat on his arm and smiled the way she always smiled, slow, certain, like the backyard already belonged to her, and said it loud enough for the whole yard to hear. "You could do better than her. Call me when you figure that out." My parents laughed. My mother actually laughed. I was standing at the dessert table with a knife over a sheet cake. I didn't look up. I kept slicing, even squares, steady hand, the way I'd been taught to keep the peace since before I could spell my own name. Then Marcus set down his drink. He didn't raise his voice. He walked straight to my parents' table, reached into his jacket, and, "Welcome back to Wounds and Wonder. I'm Vivian, I'm 29, and if your chest is already a little tight, stay with me, this one gets worse before it gets better. If a story like this has ever hit close to home, hit like and subscribe. It genuinely helps this reach the people who need to hear it tonight. And while you're here, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. This is the story of the lie my family told for 10 years, and the night it finally ran out of room. Let's go back to the beginning. I grew up in a brick house on a quiet street outside a mid-size Midwestern city. 2 daughters, 1 set of parents, and a rule nobody ever said out loud. The rule was simple. My older sister Simone was fragile. I was strong. Simone is 3 years older than me. From the day I could understand language, I understood that she needed things and I provided them. Quiet, space, patience, the last slice of everything, the smaller bedroom, and the blame, whenever blame had to land somewhere. My mother, Renata, had a gift for making that sound like a compliment. "You can handle it, Vivian," she'd say. She said it about everything: a canceled birthday, a recital nobody came to, a sister who walked into my room and walked out with whatever she wanted. You can handle it. By the time I was 10, I believed her. By the time I was 20, I had built an entire personality out of handling it. My father, Desmond, had one job in this family, and he did it well. He kept the peace, not real peace, the kind where nothing gets solved and nobody's allowed to say why. "Don't make a scene," he'd say. He said it the way other fathers say "I love you." So I became a person who didn't make scenes. I became a nurse, a pediatric nurse, which is a job built almost entirely out of staying calm while something is going wrong. I was good at it. I'm still good at it. For a long time, I thought that was the best thing about me, the not flinching. Then I met Marcus. It was a friend's cookout, a folding chair, a paper plate going soft in my hand. He taught high school history, and he talked about it the way some people talk about the ocean. He told me history is just whatever the winners write down, unless somebody keeps the originals. And he kept everything: ticket stubs, birthday cards, the receipt from our first cup of coffee. I used to tease him for it. The man could not throw away a piece of paper. But here's what I remember most about those early days. Marcus was the first person who ever asked me what I wanted. Not what I could handle, what I wanted. The first few times, I had no answer. I had to learn the question. We dated almost 4 years. He proposed on an ordinary Tuesday in our own kitchen, no audience at all. He said he didn't want to share that moment with a crowd. I cried. He didn't tell me to stop. And I understood slowly, the way a sunrise happens, that I had spent my whole life waiting for permission to feel things, and this man was never going to make me ask twice. I was happy. I want you to hear that clearly. I was happy. We started planning a wedding, a real one. And planning a wedding in my family meant planning it for 32 relatives, because that's how many people my mother considers non-negotiable. Aunts, uncles, cousins, the cousins of cousins. My family is large and loud and very proud of being a family. We gather constantly: birthdays, holidays, half-invented occasions. I used to think we were that family, the close one, the kind a lonely person would want. I had to look very carefully to see that all that closeness was just proximity. 32 people standing near each other, agreeing not to notice the same things. Marcus noticed it before I did. After his 3rd or 4th gathering with my relatives, he said something I laughed off at the time. "My family had conversations. Yours has a script, and everyone knows their lines, and the whole point of the evening is that nobody goes off book." I told him he was being dramatic. He wasn't. He was being a historian. He was reading the primary source. Then last summer, Simone's marriage ended. I won't pretend I know everything about her divorce, only that it wasn't gentle, that she moved into a townhouse 15 minutes from our parents, and that my mother started every phone call the same way that whole year. Your sister is having such a hard time. I felt sorry for her. Whatever comes next in this story, I need you to understand that when my sister came home broken, the first thing I felt was pity. The second thing I felt, I didn't have a name for yet. It started at my mother's birthday dinner last July. Simone arrived late. She sat down beside Marcus instead of beside me, and she put her hand flat on his forearm while she laughed at something he hadn't even said. The whole table laughed with her. My father smiled down into his plate. My mother watched the entire thing and said nothing at all, and the nameless thing moved through me, cold, familiar, like a draft slipping under a door I thought we'd closed and locked years ago. I told myself I was tired. I told myself it was nothing. I had told myself that exact sentence before, a long time ago, about a different man. To explain why that draft felt so familiar, I have to take you back further than Marcus. I have to take you back to the science fair. I was 10 years old. I had spent 6 weeks building a model of a working lung out of a plastic bottle and 2 balloons, and I won second place in my grade. I had never won anything before. I came home holding that ribbon like it was made of glass. That same week, Simone had been cast in a community play, a small part, 3 lines. When I walked through the door with my ribbon, my mother was already on the phone with my aunt, describing Simone's 3 lines like they were Broadway. I waited. I held the ribbon up when she finally looked over. She smiled and said, "That's nice, sweetheart. Put it somewhere safe." Then she turned back to the phone. "Anyway, you should hear Simone deliver this monologue." It wasn't a monologue. It was 3 lines. But that's the moment I want you to hold on to. Not because it was cruel, it wasn't, really. It was just the shape of things. A daughter whose 3 lines were a triumph, and a daughter whose blue ribbon went somewhere safe and was never mentioned again. I found that ribbon years later in a drawer. Safe meant forgotten. That was the mold. Everything after that just got poured into it. But the real story, the one that explains the draft under the door, starts when I was 19. His name was Julian. I met Julian in my 2nd year of college. He was the first boyfriend I ever brought home, the first one I trusted enough to let near my family. He laughed at my jokes half a second before everyone else, like he'd been waiting for them. For about 8 months, I was a version of myself I had never met, lighter, louder, a girl who took up space. My mother noticed. I remember that clearly. She watched me come alive that spring, and her face did something I didn't have a word for then. I have a word for it now. It wasn't happiness for me. It was a kind of accounting, as if a resource she'd assumed was permanently low had unexpectedly risen, and she wasn't sure she liked the new number. I brought Julian to the lake house that summer. By the 2nd day, I noticed Simone had changed, different clothes, reasons to be wherever he was, laughing at his jokes a beat too loud, a hand a beat too long on his arm. I told myself I was imagining it. On the 3rd night, I came back from a walk and found them on the dock, very close enough that I stopped on the path and didn't breathe. I didn't make a scene. I walked back to the house in the dark, lay in the small bedroom that was always mine, and built careful, reasonable explanations until the sun came up. They were only talking. I had always had a good imagination and a bad habit of aiming it at myself. But Julian pulled away from me a few days later, once we were home. He told me Simone had kissed him at the lake. He told me he'd stopped it. He was shaking when he said it. He couldn't look at me. I went to my parents. Picture this, a 19-year-old girl telling her mother and father, "My sister kissed my boyfriend." Here is what happened. Simone didn't cry. Simone didn't deny it. Simone smiled, the way she smiles, and said the sentence that would echo through the next 10 years of my life. "It was a test, Vivian. We were just testing him for you to see if he was loyal. Honestly, you should be thanking me." And my parents nodded. My father said something about how it's better to know now. My mother said Simone had been looking out for me. Nobody asked Julian how he felt about being tested. Nobody asked me anything at all. I remember standing in my parents' living room afterward, holding that verdict like something hot, watching all 3 of them settle so comfortably into the word test. The way you settle into a chair that's held you 1,000 times. It fit them. It had clearly fit before. I should have heard that. At 19, when 3 adults tell you the floor is the ceiling, you start walking on your hands. Julian left a few weeks later, quietly, the way he did everything. He told me he couldn't be in a family that worked like mine, that he was sorry, that he hoped I'd get out one day too. I didn't fight for him. By then I'd been so thoroughly taught that the problem was me that I let him go almost gratefully, as if his leaving proved the family right. I helped him carry his bag to the car, told him I understood, and waved. Then I went inside and cut a cake in even squares, and I did not make a scene. After he was gone, my parents reached their verdict out loud, more than once, where relatives could hear it. Vivian just can't seem to hold on to a man. That became the family fact. Not Simone kissed her sister's boyfriend, never that. The fact was that I couldn't hold on to a man. The fact was that I was the daughter who failed at love. I carried that fact for 10 years. It shaped who I dated, how fast I ran when things got good, how grateful I was when Marcus stayed. And then, at a birthday dinner last July, I watched my sister put her hand on another man's arm. And somewhere underneath the noise of the table, I heard that word again. Test. I didn't know it yet, but it was about to happen all over again. After that dinner, Simone didn't stop. She accelerated. I started counting. I'm a nurse, I count things. Doses, heartbeats, hours, so I counted this too. There was Labor Day, when she sat in Marcus's lap as a joke because there weren't enough chairs. There were 9 empty chairs. There was my cousin's wedding in September, where she pulled Marcus onto the dance floor and told him loudly that I had always been the practical sister, not the fun one. There was Thanksgiving, when Simone spent the whole meal telling a long story about a man she'd met, then pivoting every time to how Marcus reminded her of him, only better, until he quietly excused himself to help with the dishes just to get out of the chair. I followed him into the kitchen. He was standing at the sink, completely still. "I'm okay," he said before I could even ask. He wasn't. Neither of us was. We were just very practiced. There was Christmas, when she gave Marcus a nice watch and gave me a candle, receipts kept in the same bag. I saw them. His cost more than a week of my pay. There was a birthday in January, a baby shower in February. The same choreography each time. The hand, the lean, the little comment about how lucky he was, delivered with a smile so the words could never be caught and held. 7 times between July and March. Every single time, my parents did the same thing, laughed, or looked away, or my father said the line, "Don't make a scene, Vivian, it's your sister." Once I tried to talk to my mother directly while we were doing dishes. "Mom, the way Simone is with Marcus, it makes me uncomfortable." She didn't even turn off the water. "Oh, Vivian, you've always been so sensitive. Your sister is going through the worst year of her life. Don't take that away from her too." As if I had already taken something. I tried once with Simone too. I kept my voice as level as a hospital chart. "When you touch Marcus like that, it hurts me. I'm asking you as your sister to stop." There was a pause. Then Simone laughed warmly like I'd said something endearing. "Vivian, you've always been so serious. I'm being friendly. If you feel threatened by friendly, that's something you should probably look at for the wedding's sake." She said she loved me. She hung up. I sat there holding the phone, feeling somehow like I owed her an apology. And here is the part I am least proud of. I believed her a little. I went home and lay awake asking if I was the problem, if I was jealous, if I was somehow the kind of woman who couldn't let her grieving sister have a light moment. That is what years of training does to you. They tell you the floor is the ceiling for so long that when you finally hit your head, you apologize to the room. Marcus saw it. He never made me feel small for it, but he saw it. After the February baby shower in the car, he was quiet. Then, "Vivian, you know none of that is about you, right?" I said. "I know." I didn't. I said it the way you say a line you've been handed. He looked at the road for a long moment. Then he said something I didn't understand until much later. "I think I need to stop being polite about this." I thought he meant he'd say something to Simone. Set a boundary. Be a little colder at the next event. That's what I would have done, the smallest possible thing. I had no idea he'd already quietly started keeping the originals. Because there was something I didn't know yet, something that had happened back in January at 2 in the morning while I was asleep. I'm going to tell you this next part the way Marcus told it to me because I wasn't there. I was asleep in the next room, and I had no idea my whole life was about to turn over in the dark. It was a Tuesday night in January. Marcus's phone buzzed on the nightstand at 2 a.m. He almost didn't look. A teacher's phone at that hour is usually nothing, a robo-text, a weather alert. But he looked. It was a voicemail from Simone. He stepped into the hallway so the sound wouldn't wake me, stood at the top of the stairs in the dark, and played it. He's told me what was on it more than once now, slowly, so I could absorb it in pieces. Simone was drunk, not stumbling, but the careful, deliberate drunk of a person who has decided something. Her voice was low, almost gentle. That was the worst part, he said, how gentle it was. She said his name first, just his name, like she was tasting it. She said she'd been thinking about him since the day I introduced them. She said she didn't know why everyone pretended not to see it. She said I was a sweet girl, but a small one, that I'd never know what to do with a man like him. And then she said the thing that made Marcus sit down on the top step in the dark. There's no test, by the way. You know that, right? Whatever they tell you, there's no test. There never was. I just want you to stop wasting yourself on her. Marcus didn't know yet what those words meant. He didn't know about Julian. He didn't know the word test had a 10-year history in my family. To him, in that moment, it was just a strange, ugly thing a drunk woman had said. But Marcus is a history teacher, and history teachers have a particular instinct. When something doesn't fit, they don't throw it away, they file it. He didn't delete the voicemail. He sat on that step a long time. His first instinct, he told me later, was to wake me up and play it for me. Then he stopped himself. He looked through the doorway at me sleeping and thought about the version of me he'd been living with for months. The woman doing dishes and apologizing. The woman who said, I know, like a line she'd been handed. The woman who flinched at family dinners and lay awake asking if she was the problem. He thought about something else, too. He told me later, quietly. How many times over those months he had watched my family do their small daily work on me, and how many times he'd stayed polite, passed the potatoes, been a good guest, telling himself that keeping the peace was a kindness to me. Standing on that dark step with my sister's voice still in his ear, he understood it hadn't been a kindness at all. It had been the same silence everyone else in my life had handed me, just in a nicer voice. And he decided he was done handing it to me. He realized that if he woke me with a 30-second voicemail and nothing else, I wouldn't believe it freed me. I would find a way to make it my fault. I'd say Simone was drunk, that drunk people say things, that maybe I'd done something to invite it. He knew me. He knew exactly what I'd do with half a truth. I didn't want to hand you half of it, he told me later. You'd been handed halves your whole life. I wanted to hand you the whole thing once, so nobody could ever take it back. So he made a decision in that dark hallway. He wouldn't say a word to me, not yet. He'd find out what the word test meant. He'd find out if this had happened before. He'd gather every original he could put his hands on, and only when it was solid, only when it was something my family couldn't laugh away, would he bring it to me. He came back to bed. He told me later he didn't sleep at all. The next morning I made coffee, complained about a double shift, and he kissed my forehead and said, "Have a good day." I noticed nothing at all. That same night, after I'd gone to bed early, Marcus sat at the kitchen table and opened a brand new notebook, plain black cover. On the first line of the first page, he wrote a single date, the night the voicemail came in. He had started keeping the originals. I need to tell you what Marcus did over the next 2 months. Not in a summary, in detail. Because the detail is the whole point. It's the difference between a man who got lucky and a man who decided. First, the voicemail itself. He didn't just leave it sitting on his phone, where one cracked screen could erase it. He saved the audio in 3 places, wrote down the date and the exact time it arrived, and noted that he hadn't asked for it, hadn't called her, had never once called my sister in his life. Where we live, you're allowed to keep a message someone chooses to leave for you. Simone had picked up her own phone and spoken. Marcus simply refused to be the kind of man who throws away a primary source. Then he went through his phone, message by message, going back months, and found things I hadn't known existed. Simone had been texting him, not constantly, she was smarter than that, just often enough. A message after every family event. You look tired today. You deserve better than tired. A message on a Sunday night. Does she even know how lucky she is? A message at midnight with no words at all, just a photo of herself. Marcus had never answered a single one. I checked later. His side of that thread was almost empty. A thanks, a good night, twice just nothing. He hadn't encouraged her, but he also hadn't told me to protect me. He carried that decision like a stone, and I've made my peace with it, but I want to be honest that it was a stone. He printed those texts, all of them in order with the dates showing. That's the thing about a slow campaign. On any given week, it's one text, easy to wave away, easy to call friendly. It's only when you lay 11 months of it on a table, in order that it stops being a series of moments and becomes a single patient thing with a direction. And then he noticed the pattern that changed everything. The word test was in the texts more than once, months before the drunk voicemail. They'll probably tell you it was just a test, play along. It's easier if you let them call it a test. It was a script, she wasn't improvising. She had a ready-made explanation waiting, which meant it had been used before. So Marcus went looking for the before. He called my cousin Haley, 27, and she's filmed every family gathering for years, the way some people garden. Nobody ever thought about those videos. They were just Haley being Haley with her phone up. Marcus asked if he could see the old footage. Haley, it turned out, had been waiting most of her life for someone in this family to ask her a real question. She handed over everything and talked for 2 hours. She'd been the kid in the corner of every gathering, the one nobody performed for, which meant she was the one who actually watched. She'd seen the choreography for years, the lean, the hand, the comment. She just hadn't known it was hers to do anything about. I thought it was just how your family was, she told him. I didn't know it was a thing that could be wrong. Marcus watched hours of footage, sat at our kitchen table with headphones in after I'd gone to sleep, scrubbing through years of birthday songs and backyard noise. And on a clip from a lake weekend almost 10 years old, he found it. Background audio. Simone, younger, talking to a relative just off camera, not knowing she was being recorded, saying in that easy, certain voice of hers, "Relax. If anyone gets weird about it, we just say it was a test for Vivian. People love that. It makes them the good guys." Marcus sat in our dark kitchen and listened to my sister, a decade younger, explain the trick. A test for Vivian. It makes them the good guys. That was the night he learned the name Julian. Haley remembered. She'd been a teenager then, but she remembered me bringing home a boy who laughed early at jokes, and remembered him leaving, and remembered the grown-ups deciding it was because Vivian couldn't hold on to a man. Marcus wrote the name in the black notebook. It took him 3 weeks to find him. He lives 2 states away now, married with a kid. Marcus wrote a careful, honest letter explaining who he was and what was happening to me, and asked only, "Do you remember how it ended, and would you be willing to say so in writing?" For 11 days, nothing. Marcus checked that account every morning and every night, not telling me. He told me later he half hoped Julian would never reply. Some part of him didn't want to be the man who dug up a stranger's worst weekend. But he left the letter sent, because the alternative was handing me a story with a hole in it. He'd promised himself the whole thing or nothing. Then an email came back. It was long. Marcus read it once, then came and found me doing laundry and just held me before I knew anything, before I'd read a word of it. I didn't understand why. I do now. Marcus closed the black notebook that night. He had the voicemail. He had the texts. He had 10-year-old audio. He had Haley. And now he had Julian, who remembered everything. He told me later, that was the night I knew I could finally hand you the whole thing. He chose a Saturday. I remember it was raining. He made tea, which Marcus never does, and I knew before he said a word that something was coming. He sat across from me at the kitchen table and put 2 things on it, his phone and a black notebook I had never seen before. "I need you to listen to something," he said. "And I need you to know before you hear it that nothing on this table is your fault. Nothing. I just need you to remember that." Then he played the voicemail. I knew her voice in the first half second. You always know your sister's voice. I sat very still while it played, the way I sit still for everything. I listened to Simone, gentle and drunk, say that she'd wanted my fiancé since the day I introduced them. And then I heard her say, "There's no test. There never was. Something happened in my body I had never felt before. It was not a breakdown, it was the opposite. It was as if a sound that had been playing my whole life, a high, thin, anxious sound so constant I had stopped hearing it, suddenly stopped. For 10 years I had carried a fact. Vivian can't hold on to a man. I had let it pick my clothes and lower my voice and shrink my life. And here was my sister, in her own words, telling the truth into a phone at 2 a.m. There was no test. There was never a test. There was just a woman who took things and a family that called it something nicer. I didn't cry right away. Marcus told me later that frightened him a little, how quiet I got. I sat at that kitchen table and did the math of my own life. 10 years of careful, shrinking choices. Every time I'd ended something good early before it could end me. Every time I'd introduced a new person to my family with my shoulders already up around my ears. Every time I'd heard, Vivian just can't hold on to a man, and felt the small, sick click of agreement, because the people who loved me had said it, and surely the people who loved you would not lie. The voicemail did not break my heart. It rebuilt something. It told me the architect of my whole adult fear had been a woman who wanted what I had, and parents who found it cheaper to rename the theft than to stop it. Then he opened the notebook and showed me the texts, the "she doesn't deserve you," the midnight photo, the instruction, "play along, they'll call it a test." I read his replies too, the good nights, the nothing. I looked for the betrayal in him because I'm trained to expect it. It wasn't there. And then he gave me Julian's email. He wrote that Simone had kissed him on the dock, that he'd pushed her away, that when he tried to tell the truth, my family sat him down and called it a loyalty test until he stopped arguing. He wrote that he'd spent years feeling guilty for leaving me alone in that house, and one line I will keep forever. "You were never hard to love, Vivian. You were just surrounded by people who found it useful to pretend you were." That was when I cried. Not for Marcus, not even really for Simone. I cried for the 19-year-old at the kitchen sink who had been told she was the failure and believed it, and who had no Marcus and no notebook and no one who kept the originals. When I was done, Marcus asked me what I wanted to do. Not what I could handle, what I wanted. And this time I found I had an answer. I didn't want a screaming match. I didn't want to trap anyone or trick anyone. I'd watched my family weaponize drama my whole life, and I would not hand them mine. I wanted the truth said out loud, once, in a room they couldn't control, with every relative who had ever laughed at that dessert table sitting right there to hear it. "Then that's what we'll do," Marcus said. He closed the notebook. "We don't lie, we don't ambush, we just stop protecting them from the truth." I asked him if he was sure. He hadn't married into any of this yet. He could still choose a quieter life. He looked at me a long moment, then said, "I didn't fall in love with a woman who keeps the peace. I fell in love with a woman who keeps strangers' children alive on the worst day of their lives and stays calm doing it. I've just been waiting for you to point that calm at the right people." I think that was the moment I actually believed I'd survive this. Not the voicemail, that. We had 2 events left before the wedding, a family barbecue and the rehearsal dinner. They had no idea the voicemail existed. They had no idea about the notebook, or Haley's footage, or Julian's letter. They thought I was still the girl who slices the cake in even squares and says nothing. They didn't know that we knew. 4 days later, my mother called. Her voice was honey. "Vivian, sweetheart, we want to do a barbecue before the wedding. A chance for everyone to come together and just heal as a family." Heal. My mother used the word heal. I knew exactly what the barbecue was. It was a stage, Simone's stage, built by my mother, with 32 relatives for an audience. One more chance before the wedding locked things in, to remind everyone who the fragile daughter was and who the practical one was. To get the story straight. I almost said no. The old reflex came up hard and fast. Avoid it, skip it, don't make a scene. I told Marcus I didn't think I could walk into that backyard. He didn't argue. He just said, "If we don't go, they get to tell the story without us in the room again. They've been doing that for 10 years. Then, softer, "But if you can't, we don't go. This is yours to decide, not mine and definitely not theirs." I sat with it a long time, thinking about that sheet cake, about every family party where I'd stood at the dessert table with a knife, slicing even squares, keeping my hands busy so I wouldn't have to look up. Slicing cake had been my hiding place my whole life. "We'll go," I said, "but I'm not cutting the cake alone this time." Marcus smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man confirming a plan. That week was the strangest of my life. I went to work, checked small patients' temperatures, told their parents calm things, and underneath it all ran a second current, the knowledge that I was about to do the one thing I'd been trained since birth never to do. We didn't rehearse speeches. We made one agreement, out loud, so it would hold. We would not lie, we would not trap anyone, we would not perform. We would simply stop being the people who kept the family's secrets comfortable. If they wanted the secrets kept after that, they'd have to do it themselves. The morning of the barbecue, I watched Marcus get dressed. He took his phone, the voicemail saved 3 ways, and slid it into his jacket pocket, patting it once like checking for keys. We drove out to my parents' house, the same brick house, the same quiet street. Marcus put his hand over mine on the console. "Whatever happens in there," he said, "you are not handling it alone anymore." We walked around the side of the house. He pushed open the backyard gate, and 32 faces turned to look at us. What do you think he reached for, inside his jacket? Drop your guess in the comments before you find out. The backyard looked exactly like every party of my childhood. Folding tables in the grass, a cooler, my father at the grill in an apron somebody had given him as a joke years ago, and the dessert table near the fence with a sheet cake on it, waiting for me. Of course it was waiting for me. For the first hour, nothing happened. That was its own kind of pressure. Relatives hugged me. An aunt told me I looked thin, which in my family is both an insult and a compliment. My mother floated between tables, radiant, and my father flipped burgers and accepted praise for it. Simone arrived late, she always does. She came through the gate in a bright dress, and the backyard turned toward her the way a field of flowers turns toward the sun. My mother's whole face opened up. Simone hugged me first. She smelled like wine already. "Vivian," she said into my ear, warm as anything, "big week, you must be a wreck." Then she pulled back and looked at me with enormous sympathy. "You look tired." "I'm fine, Simone," I said, and I went to the dessert table and picked up the knife and started to cut the cake. "I want you to understand, I wasn't hiding this time. I was listening." Marcus was 20 feet away near my parents' table, a glass of lemonade in his hand, not drinking it. We hadn't made a plan with steps. We'd made a plan with one rule: we would not start anything. We would simply, finally, not protect them from themselves. It took Simone about 40 minutes. She had a small audience, the dessert end of the yard, my parents at their table just behind Marcus. She crossed the grass with a fresh glass of wine, walked up to him, and did the move, the lean, the hand on his forearm, the tilt of the head. Then, loud enough for every relative who had ever laughed. "You could do better than her, you know. You really could. Call me when you figure that out." And my parents laughed. That is the moment from the very start of this story. That is the 8th time. Now you know everything standing behind it, 10 years, a blue ribbon in a drawer, a boy named Julian on a dock, a voicemail at 2 in the morning. I was holding the knife. I felt the old machine start up. Keep slicing, even squares, don't look up, don't make a scene. And for the first time in 29 years, I set the knife down. The small sound of it made a few people glance over. Marcus set down his glass. He didn't look angry, that's what I keep coming back to. He looked the way he looks when he's about to teach something difficult and true. He stepped back, just enough that Simone's hand fell off his arm into the air, and he walked past her, past the cake, straight to my parents' table. He reached into his jacket and took out his phone. That's all it was, a phone. I heard a relative behind me let out a breath, and I understood the whole yard had been holding one. For a suspended second, every adult braced for something else, something loud. My family has always believed the danger in a room is the person who finally raises their voice, never the 8 quiet years that made them raise it. So when Marcus simply set a phone on the table, the yard didn't relax. It got confused. A calm man is genuinely frightening to people who have only ever defended themselves against loud ones. He didn't play anything, not there. He set the phone face down on my parents' table, next to my father's plate, and kept his hand flat on top of it. Then he spoke, and his teacher's voice carried without rising at all. Simone, I want to ask you something, and I want everyone here to hear your answer. When you say things like that to me, in front of Vivian, in front of all these people, what is it exactly that you're doing?" The yard went quiet. Simone laughed, but the laugh had a wobble in it. "Oh, lighten up, it's a joke. It's always a joke." "It's the 8th joke this year," Marcus said. "I counted. Vivian counts too, so I'm asking, what is it?" And I watched my sister reach for the tool, the same one that had worked her whole life. She straightened up, let her eyes go a little wet, turned to the audience, not to Marcus, to the audience, and said, in a voice gone suddenly small and brave, "Fine, you want the truth in front of everyone. It's a test, a loyalty test. Mom and Dad and I, we've always done this. We test the men who marry into this family to make sure they're solid, to make sure they won't hurt our girls. I've been testing Marcus for Vivian because I love my sister." And the yard exhaled. I watched it happen. I watched 32 people decide to be relieved. My mother stood up. "That's exactly right," she said warmly, resting a hand on Simone's shoulder. "It's a family tradition. We should have explained it. Marcus, sweetheart, you passed." My father nodded into his burger. "Better to know a man solid," he said. "No harm done." And just like that, the machine ran. Relatives chuckled. An uncle said every family should do that. The pressure broke and the warmth flowed back in, and within 30 seconds I'd been quietly turned back into the problem, the sensitive one who couldn't even take a compliment about her own loyalty test. I heard it start around me. An aunt murmured that Marcus was a little intense. A cousin said weddings made everyone crazy. Someone asked brightly whether the cake was ready to cut. The story was reassembling itself in real time, and I was being slotted back into my place inside it. And the terrible thing is how good that felt, for half a second, to be folded back into the family, even as the problem. That is the trap. They make belonging and silence the same coat and hold it open, and it is cold outside. I felt the current pulling at me, 10 years strong. Smile. Pick the knife back up. But Marcus didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't take his hand off the phone. He just waited for the laughter to die down, and then he asked one more question, gently, almost kindly. "That's a beautiful tradition. How long has the family been doing it?" My mother's smile flickered just once. "Oh, years," she said. "Years and years." "So you'd have tested Vivian's other boyfriends too. Julian, for instance." The backyard didn't know what that name meant, but my mother did, and Simone did. I saw the wine glass go still in my sister's hand. "I think," Marcus said, picking the phone back up and sliding it into his jacket, "that this is a conversation for the rehearsal dinner, with everyone there, including the people who can confirm how the tradition really works." He looked at my father. "We'll see you all Friday." He held out his hand to me. I took it. We walked out through the gate, and behind us the backyard erupted into the comfortable noise of a family agreeing with itself. Simone watched us go. The last thing I saw before the gate swung shut was her face. She was smiling. She thought she'd won. It was not over. The rehearsal dinner was at a restaurant with a private room, long tables set in a U, about 36 people, family from both sides. My mother had planned it back when she still thought she was planning a coronation, place cards, a toast order. We let her have the room exactly as she wanted it, because a room my mother controls is a room where she feels safe. And I had finally learned that the most dangerous moment for a liar is the moment they feel safe. Dinner was served, glasses were filled. My father stood and gave a short, gruff toast about family sticking together, and everyone clapped, and he looked pleased. Then Simone stood up. She had a glass in her hand, and that brave, wet-eyed look already loaded. She was going to get ahead of it, tell the loyalty test story first, on her terms, turn it into something charming before anyone else could turn it into something else. "I just want to say," she began, "that being a big sister means protecting your little sister, even when she doesn't understand it. Our family has a tradition." I stood up. My voice was not loud, but I'd spent my life in quiet rooms, and a quiet voice carries in a quiet room. "Sit down. I'd like to talk about the tradition, too." She blinked. The room rustled. My mother's hand found her own throat. I didn't shout. Everything I was about to describe, I said in the voice I used to tell a frightened child that the needle will only sting for a second. For 10 years, this family has had a story about me, that I'm too sensitive, that I'm the practical one, that I can't hold on to a man. Tonight, I'd like to play you where that story actually comes from. I looked at Marcus. He took out his phone, set it on the table, and played the voicemail. Simone's voice filled the private room, gentle, drunk, certain. I've wanted you since the day she introduced us. She's a sweet girl, but a small one. There's no test, by the way. You know that, right? There never was. I just want you to stop wasting yourself on her. The room did not breathe. I watched it travel across 36 faces. I watched an aunt's hand rise slowly to her mouth. I watched two cousins look at each other, then look very deliberately down at the table. I watched an older relative, a man who had laughed at that dessert table for 30 years, go completely gray. The voicemail was 40 seconds long. It undid a decade in 40 seconds because the decade had only ever been held together with laughter, and you cannot laugh at your own daughter's voice saying there's no test. There never was. Simone moved fast. I was drunk, she said, with a laugh that came out cracked. Okay, I was drunk. I don't even remember. You can't hold a drunk voicemail against a person. That's insane. Turn it off, my father said, not to me, to the room. Turn it off, this is private. It already stopped, Dad, I said. That was the whole thing. She's twisting this, Simone said, fast, bright, reaching for the old machine. Vivian has always done this. She gets an idea in her head and builds a whole case around it. She always has. Ask Mom. Ask anyone here. I'd like to ask Mom in a minute, I said. Keep going. But Simone didn't have a keep going. She had a beginning, and she had a smile, and she had always relied on the room to supply the rest. The room was not supplying anything tonight. Then my cousin Haley stood up, the one who has filmed this family for years and never once been asked a question. She had her phone in her hand. I have something from the lake, she said, and her voice shook, but she didn't sit down. From a long time ago, nobody knew I was recording. I think people should hear it. She played it, 10-year-old audio, crackling, unmistakable. Simone, young, easy, certain. If anyone gets weird about it, we just say it was a test for Vivian. People love that. It makes them the good guys. 36 people sat in a private room and listened to my sister, a decade younger, explain the trick. That's out of context, Simone said. Her voice had lost its music. Haley, you little. Then let me give you the context, I said, and I read them Julian's letter. I read the part about the doc. I read the part where my family sat a frightened 19-year-old boy down and called what my sister did a loyalty test until he stopped arguing and left. I read the last line. You were never hard to love, Vivian. You were just surrounded by people who found it useful to pretend you were. When I finished, I set the letter down and looked at my mother. Mom, Marcus asked you a question at the barbecue and you didn't answer it, so I'll ask it here where everyone can hear. How long has this family been running loyalty tests? Give us a year. Give us one other man it was ever done to. One. The room turned to my mother. And my mother, who has had an answer for everything for 59 years, opened her mouth and nothing came out. She looked at my father. My father looked at his plate. The silence stretched until it was the loudest thing in the room. There was no tradition. There had never been a tradition. There was a word, test, that my family pulled out of a drawer whenever Simone took something, the way you pull out a coaster so the table doesn't stain. If you've ever been the one told you were too sensitive for noticing the truth, I hope tonight you finally believe yourself. Tell me in the comments about the moment you stopped doubting what you saw. And then Simone did the thing I will never forget. Nobody was attacking her. We had stopped talking, just letting the silence sit there. And Simone could not stand the silence. She had needed to be the sun in every room her whole life, and the room had finally gone dark. She stood up so fast her chair fell over. Fine, she shouted. Fine, you want the truth. Yes, there's no stupid test. There never was, but look at her, look at me. I had everything and I lost it, my marriage, my house, everything. And she gets the nice, quiet man and the wedding and the whole little life. Me, I'm supposed to just watch that. I deserve better than what I got. I deserve him. I have always deserved more than her. The sound of it, my sister, screaming to a room of 36 relatives that she deserved my fiancé because her own life had disappointed her. No one made her say it. We'd been silent. She hung herself with her own voice, in front of every person whose laughter had ever held her up. Nobody laughed this time. My uncle stood up and walked the length of the table and stood behind me and Marcus. He didn't say anything grand. He just put a hand on my shoulder on my side, where everyone could see. Then my aunt moved her chair. Then two of my cousins. Then Haley. One by one, quietly, people in that room stood up or turned their chairs and chose. It was not dramatic. Nobody made a speech. Just chairs, the small wooden sound of people deciding, after a very long time, which way they were going to face. Some of them did not move at all. I noticed that too, without anger. A person who has been comfortable for 30 years doesn't always have it in them to be uncomfortable for you. I'd finally learned to stop waiting on the ones who didn't move. My mother was crying, performing it, I think, but no one was watching her do it. My father said my name once low. "Vivian!" Just my name, like a door he was hopping was still open. I looked at him a moment, then picked up Julian's letter, and Marcus picked up his phone, and we left while the room was still rearranging itself around the truth. For the first time in my whole life, a room had gone silent for me, and not so it could go back to ignoring me. Silent because it was finally listening. Marcus and I got married the next afternoon. It was small. We moved it to a friend's garden that morning with 11 phone calls and a borrowed arch. My parents were not there. Simone was not there. Haley was my maid of honor. My uncle walked me down a short grass aisle. Julian sent flowers with a card that said only, "Got out! So glad you did too." We did not invite my parents, and we will not. 3 weeks later, my mother sent a single text. It didn't say sorry. It said, "I hope you're happy after the scene you caused at your own rehearsal dinner. This family doesn't air things like that." I read it once, then put my phone down, and I did not answer it. And I felt nothing collapse, no guilt, no pull. Just a quiet, clean closing like a door that finally fits its frame. I have not spoken to my parents or my sister since. Some people will tell you that's sad. It isn't. Sad is 29 years of believing you are the daughter who can't be loved. This is just quiet. There is a difference, and I had to lose the whole family to learn it. People ask me if I miss them. The truth is complicated. I do not miss the barbecues or the careful arithmetic of being the strong one or being handled. But sometimes I miss the family I thought I had before I understood it had never quite existed, that it was 32 people agreeing not to look at the same thing. You can grieve something that was never real. I did, and then I stopped. Here is what I know now. My whole childhood, my mother told me one sentence. "You can handle it, Vivian." She meant it as a leash. For 29 years, I let it be one. But the sentence was true. I just didn't get to find out what it meant until I stopped using it to swallow things and started using it to set them down. I can handle it. I handled it. There's a cake knife somewhere in my mother's kitchen drawer. For my whole life, that knife was where I went to hide, head down, even squares, keeping the peace. I don't slice the cake in silence anymore. Not for her, not for Simone, not for anyone. I'm Vivian. I'm 29, and I finally put the knife down. If this story reached you, I'd love to know what you'd have done in that backyard. Tell me down in the comments, and if you're new here, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. There's another story waiting for you at Wounds and Wonder. Thank you for staying with me through this one. I'll see you in the next story.